Does mental health have an impact on morality? How can psychology help us foster virtuous habits? Is it dangerous to moralize mental illness or psychologize vice? And if so, how can we avoid falling into either extreme? All of that and more in today's video. What relationship does mental health have to ethics? It may seem bizarre to kickstart a series on virtue by discussing psychology, but the relationship between the two is closer than one might think. While ethics is concerned first and foremost with understanding what virtue is, anyone interested in virtue will find it equally important to understand factors that risk thwarting one's ability to develop positive habits or to eschew counterproductive ones. If you're watching this video, or this channel in general, there's a good chance that you have a strong moral compass and are committed to becoming the best person you can be. There's also a good chance, however, that you have at times failed to live up to your values, and may have even become discouraged because you feel like you're unable to become virtuous no matter how badly you try. The existence of free will enables us to choose between good and evil. However, experience demonstrates that our will is not always as free to choose the good as we would like. While mental health is far from the only factor that impacts our will, and it would be dangerous to reduce ethics to mere psychological fine-tuning, it is nevertheless a significant factor worth addressing. So, in what ways can mental health impact free will? Free will, at the most basic level, is the ability of a person to freely choose or reject the good. While free will can never be entirely eliminated, circumstances may restrict how free a person is at any given moment to choose their preferred course of action. Mental health is as complex a reality as is physical health, so a comprehensive treatment of every possible condition and their impacts is beyond the scope of this video. However, there are three important factors that we should be attentive to: habits, subconscious desires or unresolved trauma, and sense of agency. The role of habits in moral life has already been addressed at a surface level on this channel. We've established that virtue is a constructive habit, while vice is a destructive one. Humans are, by nature, habitual creatures. Since thinking takes a lot of energy, our brains have optimized our biological efficiency by allocating certain repetitive actions to a less energy-intensive process capable of handling them without much conscious effort on our part. While habit forming is extremely beneficial to our survival as a species, one significant downside is that it is possible to develop counterproductive habits. We can train our brains to turn to destructive behaviors as a way of coping with difficult emotions. Bad habits can be incredibly frustrating because we can find ourselves being tempted, at times seemingly beyond our willpower, towards actions we have resolved to quit. This is especially true of addictions, which go beyond mere habit to the level of dependency. The good news, however, is that it is not only possible to break bad habits over time, but it is also possible to train our brains to develop good ones. There are many channels on YouTube that go in greater depth about how habits work and how you can use that knowledge to your advantage. I will also expand on specific habits later in this series as we address particular virtues and vices. For the purpose of this video, however, the main thing I'd like to emphasize is that breaking and cultivating habits is hard work, and it's likely that there will be times where you'll slip up. It can be easy to let ourselves grow discouraged for not being as strong as we'd like, or for feeling like we're hypocrites for not living in accord with our values. Just remember that while the road to virtue might be bumpy, and there may be times where you will fall, the important thing is that you get back up and keep going. Acknowledge your own limitations and be forgiving to yourself. The second factor I'd like to address is subconscious desires and unresolved trauma. Sometimes we like to think of ourselves as purely rational creatures. We prefer to think that we can reason our way out of emotional conflicts and quandaries. While this is sometimes possible, and while reason does play an indispensable role in helping us determine the right course of action, it is nevertheless the case that we are complex beings with equally complex impulses and desires. Creatures, as a general rule, yearn for the fulfillment of their nature. When there are certain needs that we leave unmet, often because of unresolved trauma or suppression of impulses we may fear for a variety of personal or cultural reasons, our brains begin to direct our actions towards fulfillment of those needs, unfortunately often in unhealthy ways, whether we consciously want that or not. This reality can be frustrating for a variety of reasons. First, genuine attempts to cultivate virtue may be thwarted if one fails to take into account human psychology as it is, rather than how one might prefer it to be. Second, certain virtues may be called into question by people who misunderstand psychology and confuse surface-level impulses with deeper subconscious desires, such that they equate, without appropriate nuance, legitimate mastery over one's passions with unhealthy psychological suppression, which can notably lead to the development of destructive habits that create problems of their own. Just as with habits, there are many channels on YouTube that dive into the topic of the subconscious in greater detail than this video. For our purposes, however, I'd like to emphasize the following. Even when our subconscious desires may stir up impulses that we find morally objectionable, we should focus on the underlying desire behind those impulses, and acknowledge that, even if we don't like how our brains are pushing us to satisfy those desires, our underlying nature is striving for our good. It can be of great benefit to confront our underlying subconscious desires directly, rather than turn away from them in fear or try to snuff them out. It can also do us a great deal of good to confront pain in our past that may have altered our perception and expectations. These things are obviously easier said than done, but they are possible, especially with the assistance of a qualified mental health professional that respects your values. The final factor I'd like to address is sense of agency. Of all the factors addressed in this video, agency is probably the one most often addressed directly by philosophy, from a variety of schools, ranging from Stoicism to Taoism to Confucianism to existentialism. To keep things simple, agency is defined as the ability to impact oneself and surroundings. Sense of agency is defined as the subjective perception one has about how much agency, if any, he possesses. Sense of agency can vary drastically from person to person. One person may, for example, believe that they are entirely victims of circumstance, with no control of the direction of their lives, while another person may believe that they ought to be entirely in control and scrupulously micromanage everything that they can. It is worth noting that there are numerous psychological conditions that can impact our sense of agency, from depression to anxiety to PTSD to OCD. I won't treat each one in this video, but I will say that psychiatric conditions or unresolved trauma from the past can impact our sense of agency, sometimes even without us being aware of it. It is generally a good idea to seek out the help of a qualified mental health professional to address these issues when possible. Philosophical schools will disagree with each other over what the ideal sense of agency looks like, but the consensus of most schools, together with modern psychology, is that we should seek to improve what is within our control, while learning to accept and live with what is not. Both passive submission to circumstance and demanding control over the uncontrollable can be to our detriment. While we can control our behavior, for example, we cannot rewrite our human nature to adapt to the lifestyle we'd prefer to live. Likewise, while we can try to be a positive influence on others, we cannot make other people's choices for them or control what they do. Do you notice the impact of any of these mental health factors on your life? What other factors do you notice that might not have been addressed in this video? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so you can be notified when new videos are released. Also be sure to like this video so that YouTube recommends it to others. If you'd like to support this channel for as little as $1 a month, you can also become a supporter on Patreon. Links in the description of this video. I wish you all the best in your journeys towards the good life. Whatever mental stumbling blocks may be in your way, there is hope to overcome them. Stay strong, remain encouraged, and never be afraid to ask for help. The best version of yourself is always within reach. Peace be with you. This has been The Philosopher.